G'day, fuckheads! In Warhammer Fantasy, there are three distinct undead factions: the bold goth cunts, the salty wet cunts, and the supreme master race. I have no particular bias or preference towards any of these three, but if I had to pick one to be my favourite, it would likely be the one I've made a fuckload of videos about. Today we'll dive headfirst back into fantasy after months of me being a grubby 40k Jew, and we will look at the entirety of the lore of the vampire cunts, who they are, where they came from, and why they're a bunch of bold motherfuckers. You know, with Italian Spartacus also being a bold motherfucker, I'm getting very suspicious of his true nature. For fun, we'll also run a tier list and compare the vampires from Warhammer Fantasy with other franchises of vampires. Let's get into it. The vampire cunts are a vicious bunch of egomaniacs who seek to zombify the entire world and enter a millennium of darkness. Or, that's when, Warhammer writing was more about good guys fight bad guys and less about moral conflicts on both sides, which arguably creates an overall better plot. Except for Lord of the Rings, they fucking nailed the good guy versus bad guy. Anywho, the vampire cunts were not always like this. They were once mortals, but were turned to darkness through failed alchemy and receding hairlines. Let me explain. Thousands of years ago, when the Tomb Kings still had their foreskins and weren't depressed about being technically dead, a man called Nagash was born. He became obsessed with the dead and death magic, and he did everything he could to learn more. After many horrific experiments and dealings with dark elves, Nagash had finally created a potion which gave him immortality, no strings attached. This was pretty cool for him, he did get his ass whooped a few times, but he couldn't die, so it was all good. Nagash's teaching continued in secret within Nehakara, with the young princess Neferata becoming obsessed with trying to recreate his elixir of life. For some unknown reasons, maybe it was, the wind, or maybe it was because she was a woman, but the elixir kind of failed, and instead of free eternal life, Neferata got vampirism, which I guess is the same as eternal life, except there's a metric fuckton of strings attached. Neferata had become the first vampire. Neferata then went on to feed on her people, as well as convert many powerful individuals to her cause via vampirism. Vlad von Carstein, who at the time was called something way gayer and more unimportant, married Neferata and joined her in vampirism. Abarash was another such victim of vampirism. However, he was horrified and was like, "Why you do this to me, you big sexy cunt?" And Neferata was like, "'Cause I want that bald dick in me." Abarash was unique though, and he did not give in to his evil tendencies. He made rules regarding the vampires, stating they could only feed on criminals and they could never fight each other. Abarash was so well respected and feared due to being a god-tier warrior that everyone, including Neferata, obeyed his commands. However, no level of subtlety could hide the fact that Neferata was not aging, and also pale bold cunts look a bit suspicious when you live in a fucking desert. Hence, the armies of Nehakara united and laid siege to Lamea. I fucking suck at these names, guys, I'm sorry. Which was Neferata's city, and despite having a bunch of zombies and shit, the armies of the dead were defeated. Maybe it was the wind, maybe it's because their commander was a woman, I don't know. Anywho, Neferata ran away with her vampires and encountered Nagash, who was recently reborn after being a fucking failure. Anywho, Nagash was able to trick the vampires into becoming his minions that would lead his armies against the living for like the 10th time. However, the living weren't massive fans of this, and they fought hard and well against Nagash, killing numerous of his vampires and armies, until the vampires finally were able to escape Nagash's influence via some quick thinking by Vlad, and they fled into the world. Nagash cursed all the vampires so that their skin became really sensitive, and they would need to use SPF 50+ for the rest of their eternal lives. However, they were able to escape and form their own dynasties throughout the world. Neferata stayed in the old mountains, hiding in the Silver Pinnacle, whereas Abarash, being the sick cunt that he is, decided to go 1v1 a dragon and drank its blood. He discovered through drinking dragon blood, his curse was partially lifted and he no longer hungered for blood, aiding fire to the theory that the missing ingredient in Neferata's elixir of life was in fact dragon blood. But everyone knows women can't slay dragons, so that's the issue there. Abarash then formed an elite order of vampire knights called the Blood Dragons. Vlad at this point didn't give a fuck about Neferata, and she was pissed off at him because Nagash liked him more than her. By this point, we know why that was. Hence, he ditched her bitch ass and went to found his own kingdom. The perfect opportunity arose when some Darrow cunt called Otto van Drack, Elector Count of Sylvania, was on his deathbed. Otto hated everyone, and everyone hated Otto. The only person exempt from this rule was his daughter Isabella. Otto had no male heirs and hated the thought that his brother would ascend to his rule when he was gone. Then Vlad strolled in like a motherfucker and was like, "Yo Otto, I'm here to serve you. Also, your brother is a gay cunt and he likes wee-wee in his bumhole, which was enough for Otto to instantly declare Vlad as the one who should marry his daughter and inherit his lands. As a way of saying thank you to Otto, Vlad ripped Otto's brother in half and threw him out a window. Hence, that is how the von Carsteins came to rule Sylvania. Although he married Isabel for power and convenience, he ended up loving her a lot, so much so that he didn't want to curse her with vampirism, only doing so when she was so sick it was the only way to save her life. Throughout the next decade, Vlad united the unruly Sylvania, as all of his competitors and unsatisfied subjects mysteriously disappeared. And by mysteriously, I mean they were eaten by Vlad. However, once again, it got a bit suspicious as fuck why Isabel and Vlad never aged, so the Empire began sending in witch hunters to investigate, and they were eaten. Vlad doesn't fuck around, guys, he's a hungry boy. Vlad then gathered every single remaining non-vampire lord under his command into his castle, and then he massacred all of them, except for one witch hunter who was able to hide under some corpses. The witch hunter fled Sylvania and warned the rest of the Empire about Vlad, who was currently raising a massive army of the dead at this time. The vampire counts fought and slaughtered the first Imperial troops sent to stop them. However, Vlad got a bit careless and ended up decapitated. His second in command took charge of the army and declared Isabel his wife. Isabel just laughed at him as Vlad returned from the dead and murdered the shit out of his previous subordinate. See, Vlad had a cheeky Jew ring which granted him true immortality. He would always return no matter how great the injury. As his army was tied to his life force, if he could not die, neither could his army. Despite how hard the Empire fought, they lost battle after battle until Vlad sieged Altdorf itself. The Grand Theogenes was like, "Sigma, please help," and Sigma was just quiet and shit as usual. But then Manfred, the boldest cunt of them all, appeared to him and was like, "Yo, I want to be in charge of the vampires and I'm sick of Daddy Vlad. If you remove his ring, you can kill him." Hence, the Empire got their best thief to go and steal it. And the madman actually did it. He slipped off Vlad's ring somehow. During the Battle of Altdorf, the Grand Theogenes fought Vlad in a 1v1, but he was just some Catholic pedophile fighting against Vlad, the motherfucking Carstein. So Vlad beat him. However, being Catholic, is basically being the same as a Muslim, so the Grand Theogenes was like, "Allahu Akbar," and he spear tackled Vlad off the ramparts into a wooden spike, killing both of them. Isabel, being dependent on Vlad, decided to kill herself as well, hence the rest of the army crumbled. The few remaining vampires fled back to Sylvania, and the Empire was safe, using the powers of Isis. For now. There were 5 potential heirs to Sylvania, however most of them died, leaving only Manfred and Conrad remaining. Manfred was much like Vlad at the time, a great leader and legendary sorcerer. Their only main difference was how bold Manfred was, which is a leading theory on why such a massive bitch. Manfred left Sylvania to Conrad, who was a bloodthirsty psychopath, likely due to him being about as good as raising the dead as fairy porn is it and raising my cock, which to clarify means he was awful at it. I'm not a fairy. As such, he enslaved a bunch of necromancers and began tearing across the Empire, eventually encountered the blood dragons who joined his ranks. This was handy, as Conrad was a terrible commander, so the blood dragons compensated for his complete lack of tactics. Legit though, Conrad came against a large Imperial army that outgunned him, but he still won because his blood dragons kicked their ass. In a similar circumstance, a dwarven army fought against them and were defeated by the blood dragons. Eventually, the fractured Empire united and brought their armies together to try and spank Conrad's hungry ass. Unfortunately, the fractured Empire armies were still fractured, and the leaders all tried to kill each other before the battle even happened, which was the dumbest fucking thing ever. The replacement Emperor also turned out to be a zombie as well, so the Emperor is seriously struggling to get a leader who isn't a total fuckwit. They finally did, and some dwarves also came and joined them for the mighty final battle. Just as the battle was getting underway, all the necromancers under Conrad's command were like, "Fuck this, we out," and abandoned him, causing his army to crumble and numerous blood dragons to be massacred. Conrad tried to use his magic to save the army, but as we said, he's fucking shit at it, so the effort shattered his mind. He wandered around the battlefield confused as fuck, before finally being put down like the rabid dog he was. Upon Conrad's death, Manfred returned to Sylvania, having spent years gathering knowledge and power. He quickly retook command of his army and grew it to a massive size. Fresh from a recent civil war, the Empire was too weak, so Manfred strolled through all the way to Altdorf. When he arrived, however, a great spell of unbinding was cast on his army, so he had to quickly retreat lest he get his ass beaten in the least exciting way possible. Now, this is where we see Manfred's boldness really showing. Despite being sold as the most cunning, ruthless, manipulative and powerful von Carstein ever, he got his ass whooped left, right and center. Some fucking no-name characters were smashing his army as he had to retreat from battle after battle. He usually ended back in Sylvania upon receiving multiple good spankings. Finally sick of his shit, thousands upon thousands of men and dwarves invaded Sylvania, purging the shit out of it and driving Manfred to the very edges. In the final battle, Manfred was also slain and his army was crushed, hence ending the tyranny of the vampire cunts. For a time. See, plot armor is a beautiful thing, and despite dying, some random necromancer's blood flowed around the swamp somehow and finally entered Manfred's body, bringing him back to life. What the fuck? Okay, sure. Manfred realized that he alone would never be able to conquer the world, but maybe there was someone who could. Maybe Nagash could. And that brings us all the way to the beginning of the end times for the vampire cunt story. I've covered all the lore of the vampire cunts for the end times already in a video, I will link that below if you want to have a look. It's pretty cool actually. Manfred actually manages to resurrect Nagash, however being the total bold cunt he is, also manages to fuck over everyone and indirectly win the war for chaos. If you want to blame someone for Age of Signar, blame Manfred. Now the vampires from Warhammer Fantasy are definitely powerful, but how do they stack up against the other mediums? A vampire in Warhammer Fantasy is significantly faster and stronger than a normal human, but not to an insane level that, say, a true blood vampire or a sparkly little faggot is. In saying that, however, their durability and regeneration is insane. In a straight up melee fight, the fantasy vampires would edge out a victory over numerous other vampires, such as the traditional Dracula, buff V vampires, and also some younger vampires from True Blood. We gotta remember though guys that various average humans have slain Warhammer Fantasy vampires in fair one-on-one combat. So, melee isn't their strongest suit. The true power of a vampire comes with their magic and commander abilities. Sure, Spedwood Cunton could tear Vlad limb from limb in a punch-on, but could he get through thousands of raised undead while getting pelted by horrific death magic? Probably not. The threat of a von Carstein would be way more damaging to the world than the threat of any other vampire from any other source for sure, except maybe the virals from the Passage series, but they were way too overpowered. And that does us for today guys. If you want to shoot me a meme or message me, then join the Discord. On top of that, I've got custom made Warhammer looted art of Neferata, which you guys will probably love on my Patreon. Only costs you $1 and you get access to a massive library of goodies. My video probably just got demonetized for mentioning this, so you're welcome. Cheers for watching cunts. Peace.